Jason learned how to fly before he learned how to drive a car. Relatives say from the time Jason could talk, all he wanted to do was fly. At 13, he joined the Civil Air Patrol and earned a scholarship for flying lessons. He was flying solo before he was 16. Immediately following his graduation from San Jose State University in 1980 with a degree in aeronautical engineering, he became a corporate pilot. By 1984, he was a pilot with United Airlines. Flying was Jason's love, but family was his life. He rose rapidly through United's pilot ranks, and in 1993 became a standards pilot for training and testing other pilots. The job allowed him to spend more time at home with his wife Sandy and son Matthew. He would trade flights to be home for his son's band activities, to help at his Cub and Boy Scout meetings, and to coach his Little League team. When Matt was in 6th grade and taking a class trip to Washington, D.C., Jason arranged to be the pilot because he felt there was no one in the world who could fly a plane as safely as he could, especially one carrying his son. The first time he met his wife, Melody, LeRoy flew out to see her. LeRoy had seen her picture, but she hadn't seen his. How, the former Melody Thorpe wondered, would she recognize him on their 3,000-mile blind date? Easy, he told her. He'd be the one in the United uniform. They lived on opposite coasts, he in New Jersey, she in California, and had been carrying on a brief telephone relationship after being introduced by friends. 8 months later, she moved to New Jersey. They became engaged on Valentine's Day in 1997 and married in 1998. LeRoy earned his first pilot's license at age 16. After high school, he attended the Air Force Academy, graduated in 1987, and specialized in flying C-141B Starlifters, mammoth heavy transport planes. During the Persian Gulf War, LeRoy flew them to the Middle East from bases in Europe. Non-judgmental, easygoing, and polite, he immediately put the men at ease in the 18th Military Airlift Squadron at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. He had always planned to leave the military and join a commercial airline. LeRoy was hired by United in 1995, following several of his old cronies from McGuire. After a brief stint as a flight engineer, he became a first officer on the Boeing 757. Although she and her husband Eric of 22 years had no children of their own, Lorraine watched over her brood of fellow United Airlines flight attendants like a mother. She badgered her coworkers about getting their medical checkups, bought clothes for people, and even sent attractive hats to friends who were undergoing chemotherapy. Lorraine also routinely sent an avalanche of greeting cards for all occasions. 2 ill colleagues received cards after her death that were postmarked September 11th, indicating that she had probably dropped them in the mail that morning from the airport. Lorraine loved to fly and took pains to put passengers at ease. Altering herself like a chameleon changes colors, she would match her personality to connect with children, senior citizens, and everyone in between. With 37 years on the job, Lorraine was 4th in seniority out of the roughly 700 flight attendants who worked for United out of Newark, New Jersey. While growing up on her parents' 90-acre farm near Climax, North Carolina, Sandy dreamed of being a flight attendant, but the reality was that she and her 4 siblings had to tend the more than 30,000 chickens being raised for a poultry producer. However, Pat and John Waugh didn't hold their children back, and Sandy explored other areas. An outgoing, competitive person, she kept her eye on the goal, and in March 1990 joined U.S. Airways as a flight attendant. 5 months later, she was laid off during cutbacks, but beginning in October, when she married U.S. Airways pilot Phil Bradshaw, her luck changed. By December of that year, she was working for United Airlines. Daughter Alexandria was born in 1998 and son Nathan in 2000, and Sandy cut her flights to the bare minimum, 2 two-day trips a month from Newark to San Francisco or to Los Angeles. As her husband said, she always wanted to be here for the kids. Smart, strong, and street-savvy, CeeCee had a golden future ahead of her as a cop. In 6 years with the Fort Pierce, Florida Police Department, she'd worked her way from patrol officer to detective and was respected for her willingness to tackle fleeing criminals. Slated for promotion to sergeant, CeeCee augmented her income by moonlighting at a hospital and power plant, providing a comfortable life for her 2 sons. After coaxing police dispatcher Lauren Lyles to join the force in 1997, she married him 3 years later and made his 2 sons her own. But in the fall of 2000, after Lauren spotted an ad for job openings on a United Airlines website, CeeCee walked away from police work and, on October 11, 2000, fulfilled a lifetime goal. Easygoing and athletic with a trademark warm grin, CeeCee spent free time tending to her blended family, playing softball and baseball, and helping with police programs for children. My wife was a strong, God-fearing woman who loved her family. She meant the world to me, Lauren Lyles said. Every Christmas Eve, Wanda made sure that the packages her daughter Jennifer and son Benjamin would open that night included new pairs of pajamas. Some were cozy, fuzzy flannel with sewn-on feet. Others, stitched from ever zanier prints, made the children shriek with laughter or roll their eyes. Each was a tangible reminder of Greene's devotion to her daughter and son. Her goal was to give her kids the best life possible, said Wanda's twin sister Sandra. She saw to it that they got a good education. Wanda had multiple vocations for much of her life, particularly after her divorce. While working as a United flight attendant, she earned an associate's degree in art. Wanda, whose United career spanned 29 years, also earned a real estate license, then worked as an agent and an office manager for 2 agencies. She planned to retire from United in 2002 or 2003, then open her own real estate office. Her extended family included her parents and relatives in her hometown of Oakland, California, her longtime friends and even home-buying clients she'd just met. More than once, her sister said, Wanda dipped into her own pocket for a loan if a client came up a bit short at closing. Debbie couldn't stand to see anyone hungry or hurting on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, her tough New York City neighborhood. Countless times she went out to walk Dylan, her Dalmatian, only to come back and grab a pair of her husband Patrick's trousers or gloves for a shivering vagrant she'd befriended. Relatives dubbed Debbie the little apostle of the airlines after discovering that she often left Newark Airport with a stack of unused airline meals. After she rode home on the bus, she'd hand it out to homeless folks between her bus stop and apartment. She briefly waited tables in a Greenwich Village restaurant and developed a Sam and Diane relationship with Patrick, the bartender hired the day after her. The Welshes married in 1991 and were active at St. Paul the Apostle Church in Manhattan, where Debbie sang in the choir and Patrick was a lector and parish council member. A native of Darby, Pennsylvania, Debbie worked for Bell Telephone Company after she graduated from high school and was among the original Flyerette hostesses for Philadelphia Flyers hockey games. Debbie flew with various airlines before moving to United. She wasn't scheduled to fly September 11th, but had traded shifts with a coworker. I don't think it was a mistake that she was on that flight, her husband said. She was instrumental, like all those other brave people on that flight, in saving the lives of thousands of people. The first time folks saw Christian toting heavy cases or uncorking bottles at refined wine-tasting events, they didn't always realize that the youthful, reserved German was an important fellow. He was responsible for promoting one of his country's most prized products. Married and the father of 2 children, Christian also ran the Weingart Schnell winery in Biebelchem, which was owned by the parents of his wife Silke. He worked hard to stay in good physical shape and enjoyed playing and watching volleyball and basketball games. Although he was quiet, he enjoyed sharing a good joke with friends and colleagues. Frequently, it was noted that while representing the various interests of an entire industry can be a political minefield, Christian had the respect of so many people. As an adolescent, Todd defined himself by athletics. He excelled at Wheaton, Illinois Christian High School in baseball, basketball, and soccer. And when his family moved to California before his senior year, Todd used sports to make new friends. He also made the Honor Society. He attended Fresno State University to play baseball with an eye toward a professional career, but he soon realized that was not in his future. He returned home to Illinois to attend Wheaton College, a co-ed Christian school just northwest of Chicago. It was there during a senior class that he first met his future wife, Lisa. After he earned a master's in business administration from DePaul University in Chicago, the couple married in 1994 and moved to Princeton, New Jersey, where Todd began his career with Oracle Corporation selling systems, applications, and database software. The couple taught the senior high Sunday school class at Princeton Alliance Church for 6 years, and Todd was a stalwart on the church softball team. Their 2 young sons competed with each other to meet their dad first when he came home from work. Todd often pulled into the driveway and let the boys climb inside with him to drive into the garage. Their 3rd child, a daughter, was born 4 months after Flight 93. Alan did not fit the stereotype of a successful attorney. Dressed casually in his San Francisco law office, the New Zealand native shunned his computer, preferring to dot the monitor with messages on sticky notes. He wrote briefs in longhand and preferred to keep his own filing system, which consisted of dozens of accordion folders laid out on the floor. He drove an old car, allowed his hair to grow long, saved his suits for trials, refused to display his diplomas, and didn't carry a cell phone. When taking on oil companies or alleged polluters of California's waterways, Alan thought nothing of rolling up his sleeves and going to the source for information, whether it was an abandoned gold mine, a hog farm, or downstream from a cement plant. And even though he couldn't keep his office plants alive, Alan enjoyed protecting the environment and considered suing polluters both a moral duty and an intellectual challenge. Alan was devoted to his family, which included 2 sons, Chris and John from a previous marriage, his wife Kimmy, and their youngest daughter Sonali, who loved to climb in her dad's lap for him to read to her before going to work. Mark was constantly on the move. In New York, New Orleans, San Francisco, or Pamplona, Spain, he visited friends, met with clients of his public relations firm, or just traveled around the world in search of good times. Friends said Mark was always smiling, always animated. As a young boy, he lived on a houseboat 3 blocks from Miami's Orange Bowl. After he grew up, he used his size, 6 feet 5 inches, 220 pounds, to his advantage by playing rugby. Mark went on to play at the University of California at Berkeley and was a member of 2 national championship teams in the early 1990s. Mark opened his successful public relations firm on the cusp of the high-tech growth in the mid-1990s. His mother Alice has said he didn't fit into anyone's mold. He was a force for good in the world. He just lived his life as if there were no tomorrow. I guess there's a lot of wisdom in that, looking at what happened. In Ursula K. Le Guin's classic science fiction novel, The Lathe of Heaven, the main character's dreams are capable of changing reality. It was one of Deora's favorite books, possibly because the idea of creating a world without wars, disease, and overpopulation was one of her goals. As an 11-year-old, she wrote in one of her journals, "People ask who, what, when, where, how, and why. I ask peace." Deora was a junior at Santa Clara University, where she was majoring in psychology. An insightful writer who was fluent in French, she coordinated college volunteers in a literacy program at a nearby elementary school. Deora wanted to be a child psychologist because she saw the problems children faced growing up. She was just burning way too bright, her mother Deborah has said. She recently found a journal entry written by her daughter when she was 13. "If I would just live for the moment," the entry went, "and make every moment count, maybe the future would work out. Maybe that moment would be a doorway to the future." Bearing cards, carefully chosen gifts, and delectable pastries, Marion never missed a birthday or anniversary and never failed to leave loved ones with full bellies and smiling faces. "My son used to say she was his fairy godmother," said her brother, the Reverend Paul Britton of Huntington Station, New York. On any holiday, Marion was like a bag lady, pulling out gifts that were precious and something delicious. At the U.S. Census Bureau's regional office in Manhattan, where she was an assistant director, she ordered in lunch for the office on busy days. In her early days with the Bureau, she'd drop in on homes to ask government-sanctioned questions, then return to drop off packets of food or clothing for struggling families. Over the next 21 years, she rose to the regional office's second highest position. Outside the office, she socialized with friends at breakfast gatherings and joined a dining group that roamed the city in search of gourmet dinners. She chose her stylish clothes with care and lined her cozy apartment with eclectic furniture, teddy bears, and dolls. As a young man, Tom used to think that if he could ever earn $25,000 a year and have a company car, he would be king of the world. Years later, as Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Thoratec Corporation, known nationally for its creation of heart assist pumps, he was successful beyond his earlier dreams. In his hometown of Bloomington, Minnesota in 1980, he quarterbacked a high school team to the state championship game. By 1989, he'd met Dina in Atlanta, where she'd just completed flight attendant training for Delta Airlines. Their first date was at an Applebee's where they spent 6 hours talking. She knew she would marry him after he unscrewed the light bulb above the table and tossed it over his shoulder, shattering it on the floor. "I'm trying to create a mood here," he told her, "and this light's not helping." In 1992, they married. Tom liked pushing their 3 girls around the neighborhood in the stroller. And for all his traveling, Tom was cautious. Long wanting to parachute, he backed out when the chance came, worrying about his family. And when the 2 of them left for a vacation, he insisted that they take separate planes so an accident wouldn't leave the children parentless. When Bill first took up karate, he thrilled to the idea that he could break a wooden board with his hands. So Margaret, his wife, challenged him. Bill, tall and wiry like a marathon runner, asked her to brace herself against the dining room wall and hold out the board. Then Bill smashed the piece of wood, showering little splinters over her. Margaret was so impressed that she invited a friend over and asked that he do it again. For about 3 years, Bill studied karate, working his way up to a red belt before a stomach operation forced him to quit. The martial arts fit his tough guy background. Born and raised in New York City's Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, Bill worked with his hands like his brother, a fellow ironworker, and his father, a construction worker. Bill served in the early 1960s as a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division, known as the Screaming Eagles. But his personality belied that aggressive image. Bill taught welding at night at the Metal Leathers Local 46 school, part of his philosophy of giving back to the union and helping young apprentices. He was patient. Welding demanded it. Although he had to give up the martial arts, Bill could still hike, and he took frequent day trips to Harriman State Park near his home in West New York, New Jersey. He had already made 2 visits out west with his old friend Patrick Driscoll. As a single mom in 1976 needing to support her infant daughter, Georgine Rose turned to what she knew best, schmoozing and hard work. She parlayed a brief client transaction that year while working as a bank teller in her native Ohio into a job with the Bank of Hawaii. Setting up home in a 1-bedroom apartment in Honolulu with her then 6-year-old daughter, Georgine Rose hit the ground running. Juggling the bank job with a second job, she later managed beauty salons, designed logos for a textile firm, painted Hawaiian floral prints on Christmas ornaments, and drew silhouettes. Eventually, Georgine entered the perfect job for her as an antique dealer. In 1998, Georgine moved in with her daughter's family. Mother and daughter shared an interest in art collecting, but it was being a devoted grandmother to her young grandsons that gave Georgine her greatest joy. When she was home, she was here to eat, sleep, and play with the kids, her daughter Laura said. Her mother would state while enduring difficult times, "God is teaching me a lesson now. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure we'll see the light at the end of the tunnel." Patricia always put others ahead of herself, starting with her husband Thomas. After meeting on a blind date, they married less than a year later in 1958. She uprooted her life in Maryland for him, quitting a job at the local phone company because the liquor store he ran was in New Jersey. They later had 5 children, and after the youngest was 9, Patricia found her way back to work for 20 years with the New Jersey Bell Telephone. When Patricia's father-in-law died, she became the caretaker for his wife, taking her into the couple's Bayonne home. She did the same for her husband's aunt. She loved music and became a season ticket holder at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City after her husband died in 1988 and accompanied her sister-in-law Jane to every type of cultural event. Patricia believed in maintaining her dignity at all times. The words, "woe is me," never crossed her lips. It was that core strength that served her well in supporting her sister-in-law Jane, who had gone through a divorce and the death of 2 sons. They were traveling together on Flight 93. Joe doted on his bright yellow 4.4 Morgan like a proud parent and raced both a Sunbeam Alpine and an MG Midget, but nothing compared to his 1957 version of the legendary car handmade in England. Neither food nor drink ever crossed the car's restored black leather interior, but Joe's two step-grandsons often did, albeit just one at a time since it was a two-seater. At 6 feet 3 inches and 235 pounds, he himself had to squeeze into the roadster, which he called the Yellow Peril, too. Born and raised in New Jersey, Joe earned a teacher's license, but a short stint as a junior high school teacher convinced him his future lay with computers. He'd begun working with computers in the early 1970s and joined Pfizer Consumer Healthcare in Morris Plains, New Jersey in 1977. He had worked most recently as a systems business consultant developing technology application for commercial clients. Joe was flying to San Francisco with his new girlfriend, Linda, to tour vineyards, but the couple, who first met at road rallies 20 years ago, had another side trip planned. They were also going to visit one of the country's 3 Morgan dealers. Brainy and rugged, Joe straddled 2 worlds. During the work week, he had labored in the rarefied realm of computer scientists as a director of software development for the nation's regional telephone companies. But during his time off, he relaxed with the ironworkers who were his boyhood chums in the New York City neighborhood of Yorkville. Joe returned from a 4-year stint on a Navy destroyer during the Korean War and entered Columbia University, finishing his bachelor's degree at New York University and got a master at Rutgers. From there, he went to work for Bell Telephone. In 1958, Joe met his wife, Maureen. They married the next year. Joe's love of his job paralleled his ardor for the outdoors. For 25 years, he billy-goated up mountains and national parks across the country, snowmobiled at Yellowstone, and snowshoed through Bryce Canyon. Joe kept himself fit. He wouldn't let a heart triple bypass in 1993 derail him and battled back from a hip replacement 5 years later. Retirement in 1992 allowed him to make 10 trips to his ancestral Irish homeland and gave him more time to explore this country. When he would haul himself to the top of a mountain in one of his wilderness getaways, it was a spiritual experience. At the summit, he felt as if he were in church. It was, he told his wife Maureen, like being closer to God. As an undergraduate at Colgate University, Edward had to deal with ribbing from pre-med students for acing biology and chemistry courses and destroying the grading curve. Edward, a computer science major, wasn't interested in medicine. He was interested in learning. Like many kids growing up, Edward liked to take household items apart to see how they worked. The difference was, he put them back together without any leftover pieces. At age 6, he tried to rewire the basement of the family home in Clinton, New York. On the 3rd day of freshman orientation at Colgate in 1977, he met another freshman, Sandy Valdez. The two became friends and married in 1982. After earning a master's degree from Cornell University, Edward started at AT&T and, in 1996, took a position with the billion-dollar company BEA Systems. He was one of the top 5 engineers and received a U.S. patent for a software application he designed. He loved exposing his 2 daughters to science, and he loved being outside. He often swam 40 laps nightly and ran 4 miles. He would do his running late at night, after having had dinner with his family and spending time with his daughters. If she could have afforded it, Jane would have moved across the Hudson River from her Bayonne, New Jersey home to set up house in New York City. Manhattan drew her like a magnet. She always approached New York with wide-eyed adoration and could never get enough of the stores, the theater, Greenwich Village, or the World Trade Center complex. She was adept at ferreting out free poetry readings, lectures, and concerts. When Jane's 6 children were old enough, she went to work. A high school graduate, she started at the bottom of the ladder as a bank teller. 25 years later, in 1994, she retired as a bank officer. By age 73, Jane had endured a difficult life. In addition to going through a painful divorce, she lost 1 son in Vietnam and another to AIDS in 1994. She was his caretaker. In the aftermath of that difficult period, she began to grow close to her late brother's wife, Patricia, who lived 4 blocks away. They shared many of the same tastes and enjoyed cashing in together on the benefits of senior citizenship. Patricia's soft-spoken attitude provided a calming influence on Jane, and soon the duo became partners on many jaunts, including Flight 93. Whether gazing on an oddly formed hunk of driftwood or a person with disabilities, Colleen always saw the possibilities. Relatives and friends collected wood or metal objects, knowing Colleen would convert them into art. She worked the same magic for disabled people, transforming once limited existences into independent, productive lives. Like her father and younger sister, Colleen was born with a bone condition that necessitated multiple surgeries and kept her height at 4 feet 6 inches. But her father convinced his 3 children and 8 stepchildren they could accomplish anything, and Colleen found further assurance in the tiny copy of the Constitution she carried in her wallet. In numerous jobs and board positions, Colleen lobbied on local, state, and national levels for services for the disabled. Her advocacy was geared toward helping disabled people live and work in communities rather than in institutions. Unable to find walking canes she needed in correct proportion to her height, she carved them herself. Later, she branched out to create intricate Madonnas and figurines. She loved independent and horror films, Gothic novels, and fine literature. For friends' birthdays, she baked sugar cookies in quirky shapes, then laughed in glee at the responses. It wasn't unusual for Dorothy Garcia to answer the phone and be confronted by a strange voice she didn't recognize. Time and time again, it turned out to be her husband, Andrew, disguising himself. Invariably, even after 32 years of marriage, she fell for it. That was only one of the bag of tricks employed by Andrew, a California businessman who remained a prankster at heart even at age 62. Andrew balanced his whimsical bent with a devout Christian faith and a serious concern for the well-being of others. He didn't just glibly ask people how they were when he bumped into them. Like an intuitive therapist, he really wanted to know. Born to a family with roots in Spain and raised in San Jose, Andrew grew up working in fruit orchards and at his father's grocery store. After graduating from San Jose State University in 1961, Andrew went to work for United Airlines as a purchasing manager at its engineering base. Eventually, Andrew left the airline and, with his wife Dorothy, founded Cinco Group Incorporated. Airplanes were a big part of Andrew's interests. He used to load his oldest daughter, Kelly, into their Volkswagen with a sunroof and park at airports to watch the planes. They knew every model, military and civilian, just by the shape. Kelly earned her pilot's license in 1992. Nagayasu Ogasawara's jaw dropped when he saw Jeremy Glick at the 1993 National Collegiate Judo Championships in San Francisco. Ogasawara was coaching Army's team. Glick, a college senior, was at the tournament alone, competing independently. Jeremy went on to win the title. There was another reason Jeremy had made that 1993 trip. Lisbeth Makeley. The two had grown up together near Upper Saddle River, New Jersey. Though they had been named their high school proms king and queen, they'd gone to different colleges, and Makeley was living in San Francisco at the time of the judo championships. He always said he worked very hard to make nationals so he could get a free trip to see me, she said. They married in 1996. Jeremy was a leading sales rep with Giga Information Group, but in 2000 joined Vividence, an internet service provider of products about the behavior, thoughts, and attitudes of web customers. The couple settled into life in Hewitt, New Jersey, and while Glick often told his wife that he could have waited a few more years to become a parent, once their daughter Emerson was born, he wanted nothing more than to spend time with her. On her 30th birthday, Lauren made sure she got the gift she really wanted. Telling no one until the day before, Lauren arranged for herself and her husband Jack to leap out of a plane and parachute to the Napa Valley below. She knew Jack and the rest of her family might try to talk her out of her long-anticipated foray into skydiving, so she simply set it up herself. A videotape shot during the jump captured the elated grin found so often on her face when she mastered something challenging. Fit and fearless, Lauren spent her life seeking out new skills, sports, and situations, and helping other women do the same. She kept up with her sisters and wide circle of friends by phoning daily, once telephoning moments before she underwent surgery to ask an actor friend about an audition. She took classes in cooking, gardening, scuba diving, and wine appreciation. Lauren worked as a marketing executive for a law firm and PricewaterhouseCoopers. She then became an advertising sales consultant for Good Housekeeping magazine while researching and writing a nonfiction book to help women boost their self-esteem. The book, now completed with the assistance of her sister and her husband, is titled You Can Do It and is published by Chronicle Books. Donald was eager and inquisitive. He learned to love the opera, to sail, to ski Black Diamond trails, and at age 14 learned to fly. The same discipline that tempered his desire could be seen in his meticulous pre-flight examination of the planes he piloted. Donald, one of 4 brothers, was born in White Plains, New York. When his father died, his mother married Leonard Greene, the inventor of the stall warning indicator used in aircraft today, and Greene adopted the boys. By the time Donald's mother died and Leonard himself remarried, the family had ballooned to 12 children. Every Thanksgiving, all the siblings made a point of gathering for a week at a resort. Donald carried that same emphasis on family to his own brood. He dined with his wife and children every night at their Greenwich home, whipped up breakfast for them most weekends, and coached children's soccer teams. He also took the children flying. Small planes parked in a semicircle in an airport hangar created an intimate space at one black tie fundraiser. Donald's stepmother asked him to fly in the final plane and promised him a ticket to the dinner and dance. Donald told her he'd be happy to help, but forget the ticket. When he arrived, Donald acquiesced and found himself seated next to Claudette, whose own date her brother had canceled. They hit it off right away and married in 1987. When she was 12, Linda helped her father restore a car. As a high school graduation present for her in 1972, the two built a maroon fiberglass car on a Volkswagen chassis that looked like a Lamborghini but still had a VW engine. She called it the Aardvark. Linda went to college to be an oceanographer but ultimately graduated at American University's law school in 1983. After being with a private firm, it was her love of cars that ultimately determined her career path. She first joined Volvo and then BMW North America, eventually becoming manager of environmental compliance in the company's engineering department. She was also instrumental in promoting the use of hydrogen-fueled cars. Linda was an accomplished sailor and scuba diver, car mechanic, and gardener. In addition, she was an emergency medical technician and a karate brown belt. Linda first met Joe Deluca during sports car club events. Although they had known each other as friends for 15 years, they had recently begun dating. On September 11th, they headed to the West Coast. A tour of the California vineyards would follow Linda's business trip. The highlight would be celebrating Linda's 47th birthday 2 days later. While a youngster in New Jersey, Richard became enchanted by growing things. Latching onto 2 older men who gardened in his neighborhood, Richard learned how to nurture plants. Richard's far-ranging interests stretched from cooking to music, gardening to geology, astronomy to photography. Richard took classical guitar lessons and then, not content with just playing the instrument, he learned how to build one. Always pulsing beneath it all was his love of nature and his urge to protect it. A longtime employee of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Richard had most recently managed the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge in Eureka, California, his 6th refuge posting during a 17-year career with the federal government. Richard also created glassware, collected fossils, sanded rocks, did taxidermy, made furniture, and always there was a garden. In Oregon, he tended 60 tomato plants. When he moved to California, he found a place to call home. It was just he and his beloved German Shepherd, Raven, in an A-frame on an acre with a view of the Pacific. Toyisha wanted to be friends with people and to study in America. He wrote in an essay for a class he took at the University of Utah. Toyisha grew up in Toyonaka City and graduated in 1999 from Catano High School, where he was a well-regarded student and goalkeeper on the soccer team. He was a sophomore studying design and creation of materials in the Science and Engineering Department at Waseda University in Tokyo, where the 20-year-old cut back on playing soccer to join an American-style football team. In the spring of 2001, Toyisha spent a month in Utah in an intensive program intended to help him improve his English speaking and writing skills. He returned to Japan for the summer before flying August 29th to Canada to check out universities in Vancouver and go rafting at Jasper National Park. He became acquainted with and shared the enormous lunch he packed with 2 female rafters from Chicago. In a letter to Toyisha's mother, the women wrote of how they'd been struck by Toyisha's friendliness and appreciation of nature. From Jasper, he traveled east to tour the area around Niagara Falls. Intending to visit a Waseda classmate, he went on to New York City but was unable to hook up with his friend. He was on his way back to college in Japan when he boarded Flight 93. Born in Germany, Hilda was 8 years old when her parents left for the United States and disembarked in 1929 in Hoboken, New Jersey. She was full of life and had a lifelong love of dancing. Hilda often told her daughters that the worst day of her life was the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. However, the war opened up a job for Hilda, handling the payroll at the federal government's massive shipyard and dry dock in Kearney, New Jersey. During World War II, while the shipyard operated 7 days a week, so did she. The only day she took off during those years was to marry Edward Marcin, an Irvington policeman, in 1943. They'd met on a blind date 3 months earlier, but the shipyard didn't grant the newlyweds any time for a honeymoon, and the new bride returned to work the next day. Edward passed away in 1979. While Hilda worked for 20 years as a manager of Waiters and Waitresses Local 109's Retirement and Welfare Fund, it was her 14 years as a special education instructional aide at a Mount Olive, New Jersey school that she loved most, working with students who had been abused or were from drug-addicted families. Hilda retired from that job in 2001 to move in with her daughter's family. At work, Waleska was friendly but reserved, always mindful of her responsibility to supervise the employees she trained and the computers that kept her office humming. After quitting time, however, the conscientious computer whiz had no trouble unwinding. Waleska, 37, reveled in whipping up rice and beans for a crowd, shivering through movie thrillers, or dancing until she dropped at her favorite pop singer's concerts. Born in Puerto Rico, Waleska studied computer science and business at the University of Puerto Rico, graduating first in her class in 1986. She taught computer science at 2 Puerto Rican universities before moving to New York in 1987. In 1988, she was hired as a clerk in the U.S. Census Bureau's regional office. Promoted to supervisory computer specialist, she recruited and trained other computer specialists. After hours, she played tennis and baseball, rooted for the New York Yankees, went to plays, and cooked Spanish or Italian feasts for her friends. Nicole never stood still. A radiant dynamo, the 21-year-old student with model good looks and a smile that instantly endeared her to people, worked so hard that her mother often bugged her to rest. During a typical week, Nicole attended classes at West Valley College, where she was a senior, taught weight training to IBM employees, waited tables at Chili's, and did promotions for a beverage distributor by manning booths and handing out flyers. To wind down, she did 2-hour workouts. When she was younger, Nicole became fascinated with flying, always gluing herself to the window when she boarded a plane. She dreamed of becoming a pilot, but bad eyesight caused her to rethink her career goals. And so Nicole pursued studies in nutrition. She favored chai lattes with soy milk and mustard on her chicken, and physical therapy. Even as a boy, Joey had a need to know. He'd ferret out each year's Christmas gifts, unwrapping them to see what was in store, rewrapping them, and then informing his 3 siblings so they could ask their parents for substitutions before Christmas. As an adult, Joey was 5 feet 9 inches and 195 pounds with a weightlifter's gait and an endearing charm. He knew a little bit about everything and wasn't shy about letting people know. Joey graduated from a Philadelphia high school in 1977 after attending several different schools while his family moved from Virginia to Scranton to Monroeville to Olean, New York, and finally to Philadelphia for his father's job with A&P. His years in western Pennsylvania made him a loyal Pittsburgh sports fan, revering the local team so much that when he bought memorabilia, such as a Roberto Clemente jersey, he would frame it. In 1997, Joey was hired at KB Toys, supervising 400 employees at an 800,000 square foot distribution center in Clinton, New Jersey. He commuted an hour to work each way so that his wife could live close to her family. In fact, since their wedding on September 16, 2000, the couple had lived with her parents while building their own home nearby. Jean taught nursing, rode with the local ambulance service, and raised 3 daughters. Don was the president of New Jersey's Continental Electric Company and the father of 3 boys. After meeting through a church group in the early 1980s, they married in 1984. For the next 17 years, Don and Jean lived a life of quiet service to alcoholics and addicts, women with crisis pregnancies, and residents of impoverished nations. Jean spent 2 years at Duke University before transferring to the University of Rochester, where she earned a nursing degree and later earned a Master's of Education degree from Columbia University. Don, who grew up in South Orange, New Jersey, graduated with degrees in electrical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Rutgers University, and later studied at Harvard University. But he seldom mentioned his prestigious degrees or work history. In Spring Lake, Don was on the board and counseled troubled men at a residential recovery center for drug addicts and alcoholics. Jean volunteered at a pregnancy center collecting and washing clothes for babies whose mothers were clients. On September 11th, they planned to take a later flight to a family reunion at Yosemite National Park, but at the airport seized a chance to switch to the less crowded Flight 93. One night several years ago, Mickey found himself at a Beverly Hills restaurant with comedian Jackie Mason. Ever the consummate salesman, Mickey introduced himself to the funny man as he had done so many times before to celebrities, often to the embarrassment of his wife, Meredith. They talked for a bit, and then Mickey drove to his hotel. At 2 a.m, the phone rang. It was Mason asking about his car. Both men had rented the same style Mercedes, and the parking valet had mixed them up. Since graduating from Franklin and Marshall College in 1970, Mickey had worked with his father in their Brooklyn, New York glassware company, becoming the chief salesman before taking over the business, ultimately selling it and starting his own. Mickey had a mind like a calculator. He could reel off shipping costs, prices, and percentages without consulting a computer. If he dialed a phone number once, he never forgot it. He had inherited not only his father's intense work ethic, but his devotion to family. Mickey racked up huge phone bills when his oldest daughter, Rachel, lived in Portugal, and he devoted himself to his widowed mother, Dorothy, calling her 2 or 3 times a day. With her long blonde hair and a deep beach tan honed from a lifetime in Hawaii, Christine often was underestimated by the people she came up against in her job as a certified arborist with the island's oldest nonprofit environmental group. But time and time again, during her 6.5 years with the Outdoor Circle, Christine would convince developers, builders, and state officials of the need to preserve and replant native trees across the Hawaiian Islands. As a project manager for landscape and planting, she had a very strong opinion and very good ideas, said Mary Steiner, Chief Executive Officer of the Outdoor Circle. She was vibrant and caring and forceful in seeing things through. A native Hawaiian, Christine lived a half an hour's drive east of Honolulu in Kailua in a 3-bedroom townhouse with her husband Ian, their cat Horace, and a pointer red-nosed pit bull named Zeus. The townhouse was Christine's pride and joy, decorated with Hawaiian prints bursting with pastel renderings of women garlanded with flowers. The couple first met in 1984 in high school and began dating in 1993 and were married in a casual ceremony near the water. John was a retired bartender who schmoozed with the likes of Donald Trump and Dick Clark during his 20 years at a Tony Manhattan steakhouse. And like many bartenders, John excelled at listening to customers and to his family, which included 3 stepsons from his 3rd and final marriage. With his even temper, he took to his late wife Selma's children as if they were his own during the 20 years the couple was married. John hustled the youngest to tryouts with professional baseball teams, took pains to act as a sounding board for Mitchell, the oldest, when he wrestled with career decisions, and had boarded Flight 93 to head for California, where a car crash had just claimed the middle child. The burly John grew up playing stickball in the streets. He entered Japan after World War II with the Army and never went to college. Once, his stepson recalled, he visited the Palm 2 restaurant where his stepfather worked to find John talking to actor George C. Scott. When John came home, though, he never talked about the big shots he met. His stories instead were always about the workaday regulars. Early in September, Honor Elizabeth relaxed on the bank of the Seine River while vacationing in Paris and drank in the sunset. All around her, people were rushing, but she just stood still, a pillar of calm, fully absorbing the waning day's beauty. As her stepmother Esther said, people can be 110 years old and not have learned to appreciate life. By age 27, Honor had discovered the secret. Sometimes Honor was one of those rushing people. She had enjoyed a meteoric rise in the ranks of the Discovery Channel outlets, starting as a store manager in Baltimore 2 years earlier and ascending through the ranks to regional manager for New York and New Jersey. Since she was young, the extroverted little girl called Honor, after a family nickname for her grandmother Eleanor, had lived on fast forward, her young life full of ballet lessons and tap classes and learning the viola. During high school, she acted, played in the orchestra, played hockey, was a cheerleader, presided over the varsity club, and served as a news editor of the school paper. Fluent in several languages, conversant in music ranging from Mozart to Michael Jackson, an author and traveler, Kristen made a point of keeping ignorance and boredom at bay through her extensive knowledge and a worldwide circle of friends. Born on Long Island, Kristen was a high school valedictorian and graduated from Cornell University in 1957. As a divorced single mother of a 3-year-old daughter, Kristen embarked on a 30-year career as a freelance writer specializing in medical issues for numerous well-respected publications. An equal opportunity freelancer, she even penned stories under a pseudonym for the National Enquirer tabloid. She attended plays, concerts, and the ballet, rarely going more than a week without listening to live music. Her retention of information was staggering, from the finer points of a biography of Samuel Taylor Coleridge to the German lyrics of an obscure song from the Threepenny Opera. One of Kristen's acquaintances was a struggling New York author who in 1996 published a memoir about growing up in a poverty-stricken Ireland during the 1930s and 1940s. Kristen's friends say she loved the book but thought its style might keep it from reaching a broader audience. She bought 100 copies of the book, titled Angela's Ashes, and handed them out to friends. The book and its author, Frank McCourt, won the 1996 Pulitzer Prize for biography.